Welcome back to Psychology in Films. Today we'll be going back in time into 1965, where we're going to review a movie called Repulsion.
And soon she will be swept up in a frantic fury of repulsion.
So Repulsion stars the French actress Catherine Deneuve. Now, when I looked her up, she has plenty of roles in French cinema. However, she is relatively unknown in Hollywood, and perhaps in Repulsion is one of her rare occasions where she stars in an English-speaking film. The director, however, is the Polish director Roman Polanski. He is a master when it comes to psychological thrillers. If Hitchcock is the master of suspense, then I consider Roman Polanski the master of psychological thrillers. Some of his earlier work was Chinatown, a very well-known film. Another one was Rosemary's Baby. And then there's a very, very fantastic film which was in 1976 called Tenant. It's another psychological masterpiece that hopefully I'll try to review here in the future. Perhaps for the younger generation, maybe you recognize some of his films, like later films and later work. For example, The Ninth Gate, starring Johnny Depp. And then there's also, I don't know if you heard of this, called a movie called Carnage. Again, another masterpiece when it comes to dialogue films. In Repulsion, we follow the character Carol, as mentioned, played by Catherine Deneuve. Carol is a Belgian immigrant who lives in London, UK, and shares an apartment with her older sister, Helen. She also works as a manicurist in a beauty salon. We find out that Carol leads a very simple and somewhat mundane life, to the point of boredom. However, the director really shines and builds up her character fantastically. That's why I like Roman Polanski. He pays attention and calls for every detail in her life. For example, her day-to-day routine. Even we follow her as she crosses roads in the London streets, going to the bathroom to brush her teeth. So these type of detail really grasps the viewer attention and gives more light and sheds more light into the character, and that's why I like what I like about this film. I was also wondering, the plot mentions that she's a Belgian immigrant that moved to the UK, and I was wondering why would Belgium citizens move to the UK? And apparently I looked that up, and I found that apparently that the UK economy really boomed in the 1950s and 1960s, and that's why there's a rush of immigrants moving to and relocating to the UK for a better life and finding jobs, including Indian immigrants and to my surprise, even European countries. And when it comes to immigrants, we know in psychiatry that people who immigrate and relocates to a different country are more prone to psychological stress, to mental health conditions, and even mental health disorders. And in fact, practically, I see these conditions a lot. A lot of immigrants go into madness and go into something we call or diagnosed as a brief psychotic disorder. And study does support, this is evidence-based, that immigrants are more prone to mental health conditions. And again, this brings us back to Carol and her condition, her personality traits, her being an immigrant with her sister alone in a foreign country. All these factors builds a very interesting character in the film.
This is Carol Ledoux, young, beautiful, desirable. Men found her irresistible, but something is happening to her, something that she doesn't quite understand.
So going back to Carol, we start to notice that she is sensitive. She has a somewhat aloof demeanor. She rarely speaks up, if ever. Perhaps the only time she speaks up is when she interacts with her older sister Helen. We also find out that she has a dislike to men. Actually, she is repulsed by them, and she doesn't accept men or even having sex in general. Often turns down any advances from men. In fact, she even argues with her older sister Helen about her boyfriend and how he is invading her space in the apartment, and about his motives, and how she is repulsed by him and by men in general. So this made me wonder about Carol's condition. She seems to have an abnormal psychological aspect in terms of how she behaves, about her demeanor, about her dislike or even repulsion from men, and that's why the movie is called Repulsion. So what does Carol have? Does she have a psychological condition? Perhaps she has a mental illness. So that's why I found this movie interesting. So let's try to dissect and understand what Carol might have. If we take a closer look at her personality traits, we find that she has aloofness, she has a bizarre demeanor, she prefers solitary activities, she is introvert, and this made me think of a personality disorder. Some of these peculiar traits is found in a cluster A personality disorders, which we have in psychiatry, and I think to some extent Carol fulfills the criteria of something we call schizoid personality disorder. So what is schizoid personality disorder? It is, as I mentioned, part of the cluster A personality disorders. We have in psychiatry 3 clusters. So the cluster A contains 3 personalities, which is schizoid personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and paranoid personality disorder. So let's focus on the features or the traits of schizoid personality disorder, which Carol might be having. We find that they have the following symptoms present. They usually have cold emotions. They usually have indifference, or they have difficulty expressing their emotions. They are introverted and prefers solitary activities. They have little, if any, interest in sexual relationships. They prefer lonely activities. They don't react to praise or critique from others. They usually have a rich fantasy, and they are characterized generally by being aloof and being peculiar to others. So, as mentioned, most likely Carol has plenty of the symptoms that could fulfill the criteria for schizoid personality disorder. However, I was also thinking, what about her extreme repulsion from men? What could that be? Is it again part of her schizoid personality disorder, or is there something else? Now, when I looked it up, I know in psychiatry we have obsessive compulsive disorder. A lot of people have obsessions or compulsions about, for example, many different things. The most common being, of course, the germ obsessions and compulsive hand washing. So could she have an obsessive compulsive disorder in terms of having sex or being in a relationship with men? Or does she have even a phobia? Does she have fear, and extreme fear and avoidance from men? Something which is called androphobia, which is extreme fear of men and avoidance. So I think she might have both these conditions, but clearly she does have a personality disorder, which we mentioned earlier, schizoid personality disorder. So going back to the film's plot, we find that Carol's sister, Helen, decides to go for a vacation with her boyfriend, and she goes to Italy, leaving Carol behind. So what does Carol decide to do? She locks herself up in the apartment. She ditches work. She starts to be hypnotized by her solitude, to the extent that she starts to descend into madness. That is a prime example of how a mental disorder or a mental condition could start. A stressor plus a premorbid personality problem or a condition, which we already know that Carol has, and then a stressor in which she is left alone, she has no family support, she ditches work, and that's when she starts to descend into madness, and that's when her fantasy, her imagination gets mixed with reality, and she goes into a mental illness. Now, I wouldn't spoil any more of the film. I would definitely recommend this film. I know A lot of, as mentioned, the younger generation prefers the superhero films, the technical aspect. I did review the movie Moonfall last time, which is a new film that relies a lot on a big budget, galore special effects. This is an entirely different film, but I found it just as enjoyable, if not more, because it has so much elements and psychological aspects that makes a person thinks, makes a person analyzes the film and the character study. Now, in terms of performances, again, the actors and actresses are somewhat unknown. There are some British actors with familiar faces that I recognized. However, in general, anyone who's going to watch this film would not know any of the actors, but they do give a decent performance. I believe the strength of this movie is in the plot, the idea, the direction, and paying attention to details. So I highly recommend this film, and I think it's one of the best movies made, and I really rank this movie high up. So that's it for today, and until I see you next time.